Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads, where we are continuing in The Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. In our last video, we heard from Zoe about her grandmother, Clio, and her grandfather, Aramis Ben, who had been previously married and had Hieronymus been brought with him into the marriage. So the two of them were living in this utopian community, and Aramis was consumed with trying to find the PowerPoints of the world and artifacts and that sort of thing. Clio got right into that. She loved it and found a bunch of scrolls, but she found that Aramis was, I think, selling them for money to get by, and she didn't want that. So she started hiding things from him. And eventually she took her things and left him. And as we go on, Hieronymus is very angry with Clio because he believes she ruined his life and took his fortune with her, and et cetera, et cetera. So the day of reckoning might be years in coming, but come at last it would. That's where we stopped. In the year 1899, festivities were underway in countries throughout Europe, prematurely celebrating the dawn of the last century of our millennium. 1899. It happened in 1999 too. Which didn't legitimately take place until 1901. The Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna was illuminated for the first time by electric lights. Ferris wheels blossomed on the riverbanks and of many cities. Modern scientific, technological, and technology flourished everywhere. None of these new inventions, however, was so widely heralded, both by the press and the popular opinion, as a single ancient discovery. On Christmas Day of 1899, as workmen were repairing a water pipe deep in the foundations of the castle overlooking the town of Salzburg, Austria, they uncovered a large golden platter that was believed to predate by 1,000 years the time of Christ. Experts were called in and various theories as to the platter's origins were given. Some believe it came from the first temple of Solomon. Others that it had been among the objects melted down to create the golden calf, then later restored to its original form. Some claimed the design was Greek, others Macedonian or Phrygian, Phrygian, Phrygian. Since these cultures had traded with one another over thousands of years, the only consensus was that the platter was ancient and of Eastern origin. It was to be put on public display at the Hohensalzburg Castle throughout the month of January 1900. Before being carried off to the Royal Treasury House at Vienna. Hieronymus Ben, now nearly 40, had spent the past 20 years seeking the woman who'd stolen his inheritance and blighted his very existence. But the moment he saw reports in the Dutch press describing the Salzburg platter, he was sure he knew how to find her. One of the few rare scrolls his father had managed to appropriate from Clio was still in Hieronymus's possession, along with the only copy of the extensive research Clio herself had done on the document. If he wasn't mistaken, this scroll pertained directly to the recently surfaced Salzburg platter. He took the train from Amsterdam to Salzburg, arriving a day before the exhibition was to open. He went on foot from the station to the castle and contacted the curator at once. It wasn't the platter he was interested in, but he did want the woman, who would surely travel to Salzburg to see it, if only Hieronymus could quickly and effectively plant the right bait. After handing over the rare scroll to the curator, Hieronymus provided him with Clio's papers, claiming they were those of his late father, Aramis Ben, a noted patron of Schliemann. Hieronymus readily agreed to the museum's request to stipulate that these documents hadn't yet been authenticated, asking only that at least their general contents and the name of their donor, his late father, be made public at the opening of the show. Having studied the research notes in depth himself, Hieronymus knew that when they surfaced, the attention they drew would also draw his stepmother like a magnet. In the scroll, which Clio and her father had found in an ancient clay jar in the Holy Land, the platter was said to have once been a decoration on a shield in ancient Greek times, and later to have been part of the hoard of Herod the Great. It was stored in the reign of Herod's son, Herod Antipas, at the palace of Machaerus. At the time, John the Baptist was incarcerated there and beheaded. Antipas later brought the platter to Rome, where it passed through the hands of 3 emperors, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Clio's subsequent researches into the subject indicated that Nero, believing the platter so possessed unusual occult properties, had it removed from Rome to Subiaco and placed in a famous oracular cave, just across the valley, facing his summer palace there. Some of these words I am not familiar with. After Nero's premature death by assassination, the platter stayed in the cave untouched for nearly 500 years. This very cave at Subiaco became, in AD 500, the site of Saint Benedictine's famous Hermetic retreat. According to Clio, once the platter surfaced, it passed into the hands of the Benedictine order, the Black Monks, where its power as a holy relic enabled them to proselytize the Germanic lands successfully and to become the most powerful monastic force in continental Europe. Okay. The first meeting between Hieronymus Ben and his long-absent stepmother, Clio, was not what either might have imagined. She, still beautiful at 55, and he, a dazzling, handsome, blonde Netherlander, how about that one, of not quite 40, made a striking couple. But Hieronymus quickly learned that, much as he wanted to repair past injustices to himself, so did Clio, injustices to herself. Clio explained that she had returned to the utopian community by summer's end, as promised. But she'd learned that the community had been broken up for want of funds, and that her husband had taken the children and returned to Holland. After the war, she contacted the Netherlands government and received notice that her family, missing in the war zone, were all presumed dead. For the 30 years that Hieronymus had spent resenting Clio and planning to exact restitution and retribution, she'd been living in Switzerland among the gypsies. As before, imagining the Bens all long dead. She'd even recently adopted a young girl to replace her only child, and planned to begin soon to train her in the same language and research techniques that Clio herself, under the tutelage of her father, had also acquired at an early age. When she learned that her natural daughter was indeed alive, but had been put in a foundling home 30 years ago, and that Hieronymus Ben had done essentially nothing to find his sister in all that time, Clio understood that this man before her, as handsome and dashing as his late father, was also as cold-blooded and self-involved. Clio proposed an arrangement between them that required a compromise. Since Hieronymus Ben was no blood relation of hers, she owed him nothing, she said. But if he would use his connections in the Calvinist church to discover the foundling home where his sister had been sent, then trace her and find her and bring her to Switzerland so her mother could see her at last, Clio would settle a handsome sum from her own large estate on each of them. To this, Hieronymus swiftly agreed, but he was hardly expecting what would happen next. And we're going to continue on just a little bit in the spirit of completing the book before the end of the year. As Wolfgang and I sat there in a silence so tense you could cut, Zoe continued, the long-lost half-sister my father was sent in search of was a half-sister he eventually found, to the great misfortune of each, was the only woman who would soon become his wife, Hermione. Oh my, what a mess. Wolfgang was regarding Zoe with an expression I couldn't fathom. Then his eyes narrowed. You mean to say your parents were half brother and sister, Zoe finished for him, but I'm not through. I've heard enough, I said abruptly. So this was the reason everyone had kept our family relations under wraps all these years. I truly thought I was going to be ill. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to escape from the room, but Zoe was having none of it. These manuscripts were given into your possession, she said, but you'll be able neither to protect them nor make use of them unless you know everything. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Wolfgang pick up his wine glass and throw down a healthy slug. He'd been awfully quiet and non-committal throughout all of this. I wondered how he was taking it. After all, Zoe was his grandmother too. I prayed to God this was the last little surprise coming. What could be worse? Through his connections with the Calvinist church, said Zoe, Hieronymus located the foundling home and learned that his half-sister Hermione, at the age of 16, had been sent to South Africa with a boatload of other girls as Boer mail-order brides. The war was over, so he took a boat to the Cape to find her. Watching me closely, she added, Christian Alexander had just died of complications of a war wound. Now, that's a name we heard before. Hermione inherited his fortune, including vast mining and mineral concessions. But she was also pregnant with a second child. She was beside herself with grief and fear about her future. A widow alone with 2 children in a war-torn country, when the stunningly handsome Hieronymus Ben arrived, claiming he was her cousin. Wait, my brain cried as I tried to piece all this together. Something else was wrong in this picture, and this time I knew exactly what it was. 2 children, I said in horror. You mean Christian Alexander was the father of both of Hermione's sons, Lafcadio and Ernest? But how could that be? This is the lie that lurks behind it all, said Zoe. Ernest was the one who exposed the truth of our family's past, though it took him many long years to understand what treachery had been practiced on him and Lafcadio. Separating them in childhood, lying about Ernest's parentage, and all the while they were full brothers, sons of the same parents. Hermione, and Christian Alexander. Ernest came to Europe not long before Pandora's death and confronted her. She must have known all along, he said, so why hadn't she told him? I think you'd better tell us, I said to Zoe, from the beginning, including Pandora's connection. And she did. Time? Okay, I think we'll stop there at the end. She did. Oh my gosh, I thought the family lines were messed up and crisscrossed before. Now there's like, whoo, even more. I might have to redraw that diagram, but I'll wait till I read a little more so I know I have it all. All right, you guys, I hope you're enjoying the story. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.